The cold night. The night was cold and cruel. Wind howling through the empty streets of a ruined city. Broken lights flickered on the cracked roads, and shadows danced like ghosts among the fallen buildings. A man named Eli walked alone, his shoulders covered with a torn brown blanket, his shoes ripped and his breath misting in the air. He had no home, no family, no reason to keep walking, but something inside him refused to give up. He had seen too many winters, too many days without food, but this night felt colder than usual, colder than his bones could bear. He stopped under an old bridge, his usual place to rest, a small corner where the wind couldn't reach. There he sat down, hugging his knees, wrapping the thin blanket tighter around him. His stomach growled softly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in 2 days. He sighed, closing his eyes, hoping sleep would take away the pain for a while, but then he heard something, a faint sound, like a whisper carried by the wind. At first, he thought it was his imagination, maybe a stray dog or the echo of his own breathing. Then it came again, a weak, trembling cry, almost like a child's voice but not quite human. Eli frowned and stood up, listening carefully. The sound came from deeper under the bridge. Near the frozen riverbank, he hesitated, fear mixing with curiosity. People said strange things lived in the ruins these days. Machines, mutants, maybe even visitors from the stars. But the sound was so weak, so full of pain, that his heart couldn't ignore it. He grabbed his blanket tighter and walked toward the voice, his shoes crunching softly on the frost there. Between broken stones and scraps of metal, he saw something glowing faintly. It was a shape, small, curled up, trembling. The glow came from her skin, a faint silver-blue light, fading with every breath she took. Eli's eyes widened. He had seen pictures of aliens on old posters, the ones who came to trade long ago before Earth fell into ruin. But this one looked different, fragile, young, almost human in shape but with markings on her face that shimmered like stars. She was hurt badly, her clothes torn, her arm bleeding with strange silver liquid that steamed when it touched the air. Her lips moved slowly, whispering in a language he couldn't understand. Eli knelt beside her, not knowing what to do, his hands shaking from the cold and fear. Hey, don't move," he said softly, his voice trembling. "You're hurt. Just stay still." Her eyes flickered open, bright violet, glowing faintly, and for a second, they locked on his, full of confusion and pain. Then her body shivered violently, and she tried to cover herself with her broken hands as if she feared him. Eli looked at his blanket, the only thing he owned in the world, the only thing keeping him alive tonight. He took a deep breath, then slowly wrapped it around her small frame. "Here. Take this," he said gently. "It's not much, but it'll keep you warm." The alien gasped softly when the blanket touched her skin, her glow flickering brighter for a moment. Eli could feel her heartbeat, weak but still there, and he realized she was freezing. He sat beside her, pulling the edges of the blanket closer. Shielding her from the wind, she looked at him again, her voice barely a whisper. "Why, help?" Her accent was strange, the words broken but understandable. Eli smiled faintly. "Because you needed it," he said, "and I've got no one else to share it with." Her eyes softened and a single tear, bright as silver, rolled down her cheek. Hours passed slowly, the wind biting harder, but Eli didn't move. He checked her pulse again and again, making sure she was still breathing, every time she shivered. He held the blanket tighter around her, ignoring his own cold. He whispered stories to keep her awake. Old tales of the city before the fall, of sunlight, music, and laughter. He didn't know if she could understand, but sometimes she made a soft sound, and maybe a laugh, maybe a sigh, and that was enough at one point. She opened her eyes again and said something he didn't expect. "Human, kind," she whispered, her words trembling in the air before she fainted again. Eli froze, those two words echoing in his head. He didn't know what she meant, but something about them felt heavy, important. He brushed the frost from her hair and smiled sadly. "Yeah, sometimes," he said softly. "Sometimes we are." As the night grew deeper, strange lights flickered far above the clouds and silent, distant but watching, unseen by Eli. Tiny drones hovered near the bridge, their red eyes recording everything. They sent the images to orbit, where cold mechanical minds analyzed them. A single word pulsed across alien communication screens: "Queen found." But Eli knew nothing of that. He just sat quietly, holding the shivering being close, his blanket wrapped around her like a promise. He whispered one last thing before sleep took him. "You'll be okay. I'll keep you safe, and somewhere far above Earth." Ships began to move, engines igniting with fire and light. An army was coming, not for war, but for the man who gave away his only warmth. Eli slept peacefully, unaware that his simple act of kindness had already changed the destiny of two worlds. The night of silence. The night grew colder, and the silence around the bridge turned heavy. Eli woke up shivering, his hands numb, his breath white in the air. Beside him, the alien girl still lay motionless, her body faintly glowing under the old blanket. For a moment, he thought she had died, and panic filled his chest. He leaned closer, pressing 2 fingers to her neck and sighed with relief. There was still a heartbeat. Faint but steady, he whispered softly, "Hey, don't leave me now," though he knew she couldn't hear. Her breathing came slow, almost mechanical, and strange lines of light moved under her skin like tiny rivers. Eli didn't understand it, but somehow he felt calm just watching the glow. It reminded him of stars, and stars were the only beautiful thing left in his world. He reached into his torn bag and took out the last thing he owned, a half-filled bottle of water. "Here," he murmured, lifting her head carefully. "You need this more than me." He poured a few drops between her lips. The water touched her tongue and instantly shimmered. As if reacting to something within her, her glow brightened for a moment, and she breathed deeper, her chest rising slowly. Eli smiled faintly. "There you go. Stay with me, little star," he said, not even realizing what he had just called her. The minutes turned into hours, the sky above dark and endless. Every sound echoed, the creak of distant metal, the whisper of wind, the quiet hum of broken machines in the city. Eli kept himself awake, his back against the cold wall, afraid that if he slept, she might slip away again. He started talking, not to her, but to himself, maybe to keep sane. "I used to have someone," he said softly, "a sister. She got sick when the city lost power. No doctors left, no light, just darkness." He sighed. "I couldn't help her, but maybe this time, maybe I can." The alien girl stirred slightly, her fingers twitching. Her skin flickered like fireflies, and a soft hum came from her chest. Rhythmic and strange, Eli frowned, watching closely. Tiny machines, almost invisible, moved under her wounds, sealing them slowly, repairing torn tissue with light. He whispered, amazed, "You're healing yourself." Incredible. Far above the clouds in orbit, a satellite blinked alive. Not human, not Earth-made. It detected the faint life signal of its lost queen. Dozens of massive ships, hidden beyond the moon's shadow, began to stir from sleep. Engines hummed, armor plates shifted, and alien voices filled the command decks. A cold, mechanical order spread across the fleet. Signal confirmed. Initiate recovery protocol. Back on Earth. Eli had no idea that the sky itself was watching him. He only knew that he couldn't let her die. He tore a piece from his own shirt, wiping the strange silver blood from her arm. Every time he touched her, her glow steadied, as if his warmth gave her strength. He wondered if her kind could even feel kindness, or if she saw him as just another primitive creature. But then her lips moved again, whispering softly. "Eli." He froze, staring at her. "How? How do you know my name?" he whispered in disbelief. Her eyes opened slightly, glowing faint violet. She struggled to speak, her voice barely a breath. "Memory, Link." Then she fainted again, her body limp but stable. Eli sat there in shock, staring at her, wondering what kind of creature could reach into his thoughts. Hours passed, and a thick fog rolled over the river. The air buzzed faintly like static, and strange lights flickered in the distance. Blue, silent, not from any human drone. Eli looked up, squinting. "What now?" he muttered. For a brief second, he thought he saw shapes moving in the clouds, enormous, shifting like shadows with purpose. But then the fog thickened and everything went quiet again. He leaned back against the wall, exhausted. The girl's glow was now softer, calmer. Like a heartbeat in rhythm with his, he smiled weakly. "Guess we made it through the night," he murmured. He didn't know that the silence around him was not ordinary. It was the calm before something huge, something that would shake the world by sunrise. In orbit, the alien fleet waited for final confirmation. Their scanners focused on one small bridge, one human signature sitting beside their dying queen. "Prepare descent," the commander said in a cold metallic tone. "No harm to the human. He is the protector, down below. Eli finally closed his eyes for the first time in years. He didn't dream of hunger or fear, he dreamed of stars. He dreamed of flying lights and voices whispering in the dark. Calling his name gently when he woke again, the air felt strange, charged, and the world was no longer silent. When he woke again, the air felt strange, charged, and the world was no longer silent. A distant roar echoed through the sky, not thunder, not planes, something far greater. Eli stood, his blanket fluttering in the wind, staring upward, his heart pounding. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, he saw them. Huge shapes descending through the clouds, dozens of ships, glowing silver and blue, falling from the heavens like a storm of angels. He looked back at the alien girl, still wrapped in his blanket, and whispered, "Looks like your friends found you." The ground trembled, the air shimmered, and for the first time Eli realized the night of silence was over, and his life would never, ever be the same again. The morning shock. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the ruins of the city, painting the shattered skyline in a dull orange glow. Eli rubbed his eyes, his body stiff from the cold ground, his mind foggy from exhaustion. For a moment, he forgot where he was, until he looked beside him and saw the glowing figure still lying under his torn blanket. The alien girl's breathing was slower now, steady, her wounds faintly sealed by a web of silver light. He smiled weakly, whispering, "You made it through the night." But then, the air around him began to hum. It wasn't the hum of a car engine or a drone. It was deeper, like the world itself was vibrating. The birds stopped singing, the wind paused, even the river seemed to hold its breath. Eli looked up, confused, his heart pounding. High above the clouds, streaks of blue light were cutting through the sky. Silent at first, then louder, heavier. Within seconds, the ground began to tremble beneath his feet. He stumbled back, shielding his eyes as the sky tore open with fire and light. Massive shapes descended through the mist. Not planes, not meteors, but ships. Dozens of them, sleek and silver, glowing with energy, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal. Eli's jaw dropped. He whispered, "No way." As his blanket fluttered in the blast of wind that followed, the ships slowed as they neared the ground, hovering silently over the ruined city. Their engines gave off no smoke, no sound of fuel, just pure vibration that made the air buzz against his skin. Then, with a deep echoing thud, one of the ships landed in the open field near the bridge, crushing broken cars and concrete like toys. The earth shook so violently that Eli fell to his knees, covering his head. He could feel the heat of the engines, smell the electric air, hear a pulse. Like a heartbeat coming from the ship itself, the alien girl stirred beside him, her eyes flickering open, her glow brightening in rhythm with the sound. She whispered something in her strange language, her hand trembling as she pointed toward the ship. Eli followed her gaze, feeling his throat tighten. A ramp opened beneath the giant vessel. Out stepped figures, tall, armored, and terrifying. Their armor gleamed like molten silver, covered in glowing lines that pulsed with the same energy as the ship. Each one carried a long weapon that looked alive. Humming faintly, Eli's body froze in place, his instincts screaming to run. But his legs refused to move. He had never seen anything like them. Beings that looked almost human, but too perfect, too sharp. Their faces hidden behind helmets shaped like animal skulls. One of them knelt beside the alien girl, scanning her quickly with a device that emitted a soft blue beam. The light swept over her, and symbols began to glow across their armor. Another soldier spoke, his voice echoing through a strange translator. "Vital sign stable, it is her." Eli didn't understand the words, but he could feel the tension, a kind of fear mixed with relief. He stepped back slowly, trying not to make a sound. The soldier nearest him turned sharply, raising a hand, and a wave of invisible force froze Eli in place. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His body locked as if the air had turned to stone around him. A deep, commanding voice echoed through the air, coming from the ship itself. "Identify the human." the voice demanded, metallic yet filled with emotion. The soldiers looked at one another before one replied. He was found beside the queen, providing warmth. There was silence for a long, tense moment. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Bring him to me." The force around Eli released, and he fell to the ground, gasping for air. Two soldiers approached, their footsteps heavy but controlled. They lifted him gently, not rough or violent, and carried him toward the massive ship. Eli's heart raced. He looked around, realizing the entire city was watching. People had come out from the ruins, staring at the ships in fear and wonder. Phones recorded shaky videos. Drones hovered. The world was holding its breath. Inside the ship, the air felt alive. Glowing walls, moving light, and faint sounds like whispers of the stars. They placed Eli before a large pod made of crystal and silver. Inside it, a figure was slowly rising. The alien girl, now radiant and awake, her wounds gone, her eyes burning like twin suns. She stepped forward, her movements graceful and powerful, no longer weak or dying. When she spoke, her voice echoed like music and thunder together. He gave warmth, when all else gave pain. Every soldier in the room knelt instantly, lowering their heads. Eli stared in disbelief, realizing the truth. She wasn't just another alien. She was their leader, their queen. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, a mix of strength and deep emotion. Then, to everyone's shock, she walked toward him and lowered herself to one knee. The soldiers gasped softly, their glowing eyes flickering in disbelief. The queen placed her hand gently on Eli's chest, right where his heart was beating fast. "Your kindness reached beyond the stars," she said quietly. "You saved me when my people could not." Eli could barely speak, his voice shaking. I just gave you my blanket." The queen smiled faintly, her eyes shimmering with light. "And in doing so, you gave my people hope." Outside, the other ships hovered silently over the horizon. Their presence turned night into a glowing dawn. Every human in the city looked up, wondering what would happen next. But none of them knew that the world had just changed forever. That one homeless man's small act of compassion had brought peace between two worlds. And as the alien queen stood beside Eli, her eyes glowing brighter than the morning sun, the armies of the stars bowed before a human, the man who shared his only warmth, the queen. Awakens. Inside the alien ship, time felt different. The air shimmered like liquid glass, and faint lights flowed across the walls like veins of energy. Eli stood frozen, his heart still pounding as he stared at the woman before him, the same wounded creature he had found dying under a bridge. Now she stood tall and radiant, her skin glowing like soft starlight, her eyes bright with power. Every movement she made left trails of light behind her, as if the ship itself responded to her presence. Around them, dozens of alien soldiers knelt in silence, their armor glowing faintly with synchronized pulses. Eli couldn't breathe properly. His mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. The girl, no, the queen, turned to him slowly, her silver hair flowing as if it moved with invisible wind. Her gaze was calm but full of something deeper, something human, something grateful. "You gave warmth to me," she said softly, her voice echoing like a melody inside his head. Eli swallowed, his voice trembling. "You were dying. I couldn't just walk away." Her eyes softened. "Even when your world had nothing left to give, you gave anyway." She took a step closer, and the soldiers bowed even lower. No one had ever seen their queen descend from her command platform. No one, until now. A faint hum filled the air, and suddenly holograms appeared all around them. Eli gasped as he saw images of stars, galaxies, and strange alien symbols floating like living light. The queen raised her hand, and one of the holograms focused on Earth. It showed a world filled with scars, pollution, fire, war, hunger, and yet glowing faintly, a single spark. "That spark," she said quietly, pointing at it, "is you." Eli took a small step back, overwhelmed. "Me? I'm just nobody." The queen shook her head slowly. "You are the reason I still breathe." Her tone grew solemn. My ship crashed after a betrayal. My own people left me to die. They thought the humans were cruel and cold. She paused, her voice trembling for the first time. But you, a broken human, living among ruins, shared your warmth with an enemy you did not know. The words echoed through the chamber like truth carved in stone. The soldiers remained silent, their faces hidden behind glass visors. One of them finally spoke, his voice low. Your Majesty, our laws forbid kneeling before any non-royal. The Queen turned slowly, her voice calm but firm, then changed the laws. The soldier bowed his head again. As you command. Her people looked at Eli with a mix of awe and confusion, a mortal human standing where no alien had ever been allowed. She turned back to him and reached for his hand. Eli hesitated, unsure if he should touch her, but she smiled faintly and closed the distance herself. Her hand was warm, softer than he imagined, glowing with faint light that wrapped around his skin like mist. In that instant, Eli felt something rush through him. Not pain, not fear, but a strange energy. He could see flashes of stars, memories that weren't his, ships flying across oceans of space, alien laughter, alien sorrow, alien love. He pulled his hand back, gasping, "Why, what was that?" The Queen looked at him gently. "I showed you a memory. What it means to belong to a world that remembers kindness." The lights in the ship dimmed, and the Queen walked slowly to the center of the chamber. She raised her hands and the ship responded. Panels opened, releasing waves of soft light. Outside, other ships hovering above the city mirrored her movement, projecting beams of white energy toward the ground. Humans on the streets stared upward, their fear melting into awe as the ruins began to glow. Broken buildings repaired themselves, streetlights reignited, and water started flowing again in dry canals. The Queen turned back to Eli. Your world was forgotten, abandoned even by your own kind, but one act of mercy brought light back to it. Eli stared at the glowing horizon visible through the ship's transparent wall. Cities that were dead now shimmered with energy. Like the world was breathing again, he whispered, almost in disbelief. You're rebuilding Earth? The Queen nodded slowly. In your name? Eli shook his head quickly. No, not in my name. Do it for the people who still need hope. She smiled softly. Then hope it shall be called. Her words spread through the ship like a command carried by light. Every alien voice in the fleet whispered the same new word. Hope. For them, it was no longer a human word or an alien one. It was something beyond language, something sacred. Born from a single blanket shared on a cold night. The Queen took one last look at Eli before she stepped back into her chamber. You saved a queen, she said quietly. But more than that, you reminded an empire what it means to feel. As the doors began to close, her voice echoed once more. Tomorrow the universe will know your name, Eli, the human who gave warmth to a dying star. Eli stood there silently, still wearing his torn clothes, still just a man who had tried to help outside. Millions watched the sky glow with alien light, and for the first time in history, humanity looked up not in fear but in wonder. The gift beyond value, the world was no longer the same. Where there had once been ruin and silence, there was now light and motion. The alien ships hovered above Earth's broken cities like guardians made of silver fire. Their energy spread across the land, repairing what humanity had lost. And in the middle of it all stood one man, Eli, the homeless wanderer who had given away his only blanket. He stood near the bridge where it all began, watching in awe as machines the size of buildings floated overhead. They emitted waves of glowing particles that turned cracked roads into smooth paths. Broken towers rebuilt themselves piece by piece, and dead trees bloomed again with light-colored leaves. Children peeked from ruined windows, eyes wide, wondering if this was a dream. Some people knelt and prayed, others cried quietly. Not understanding why this miracle had come, Eli didn't know either. He just knew that the alien queen had kept her promise. He could still feel the warmth of her touch, still see her glowing eyes in his mind. He remembered her words. You gave when you had nothing. Those words echoed in him like a heartbeat. A bright sound filled the air, soft like a chime but powerful enough to vibrate through his bones. He looked up and saw one of the ships slowly descending again. The crowd backed away in fear, but Eli didn't move. He knew who was coming. The air shimmered as the queen appeared once more. Walking down the light ramp surrounded by her guards, she wore flowing silver armor, but her face was uncovered, calm and kind. The people around Eli gasped, some bowing instinctively, others staring in silence. The queen approached him slowly, her voice echoing like music. "Eli of Earth," she said gently, "you gave warmth without reason, and kindness without reward." She raised her hand, and a small orb of light floated between them. Spinning softly, it shimmered like a living star, radiating warmth that didn't burn but soothed. "This," she said, "is a seed of life from my world. It can heal land, purify air, and restore what was lost." She looked around at the broken city. "With this, your planet will live again." Eli stared at the glowing sphere. Speechless, he could feel its energy pulsing through the air. "It's beautiful," he whispered, "but I don't deserve it." The queen smiled faintly. "That is why you do." Her soldiers lowered their weapons and placed their hands over their chests, bowing to him. Even the air around them seemed to glow brighter. It was as if the universe itself paused to watch the exchange between a queen and a beggar. Eli reached out and touched the light. The moment his fingers brushed it, a burst of warmth spread across the ground. The river near the bridge began to flow again, clear as crystal. Flowers bloomed where his footsteps fell, and the air smelled fresh for the first time in years. People cheered, some shouting his name, others falling to their knees in gratitude. But Eli only looked at the queen, shaking his head. "I didn't want to be a hero," he said softly. "I just didn't want her to die." The queen's eyes softened. "That is what makes you one." She turned to her fleet and spoke a single word in her native tongue. The ships responded instantly, spreading beams of light across the continents. From deserts to oceans, energy flowed, restoring what centuries of war had destroyed. Mountains healed, forests grew back, and skies turned blue again. The world began to heal, all because one man chose compassion over fear. Then something unexpected happened. The queen placed her crown, a small ring of silver light, at his feet. Gasps filled the air. Her people murmured in disbelief. "The crown of Oralis. No one may remove it." She looked at them calmly. "Today I do." Turning to Eli, she said, "You have no throne, no home, no riches, yet you are greater than any ruler I have known." Her voice trembled slightly. "Not with weakness, but emotion. You gave me your only warmth, and now I give you my people's eternal promise. The stars will protect you and your kind." Eli knelt slowly, picking up the crown, its light dancing in his hands. He looked up at her, his voice low. "I don't want power." The queen smiled, her eyes glistening like twin galaxies. "Then you are the only one worthy of it." The crown dissolved into light and wrapped around his arm like a glowing band. Merging with his skin, her soldiers lowered their heads deeply, the gesture of the highest honor. And for the first time in human history, alien and human bowed together under the same sky. That night, every screen on Earth broadcast the same message, not from governments, not from leaders, but from her. "This world has been touched by a kindness we cannot forget," she said. "Remember his name, remember his warmth." Eli watched quietly from the bridge, the stars reflecting in the river below. The world called him a savior, a legend, a hero. But in his heart, he still felt like the same man who had once shared his only blanket with a stranger. And somewhere high above, on the command ship orbiting Earth, the queen looked down from the window of light, whispering softly, "The gift was not ours to give. It began with him." The war that never happened. The world had never seen such light before. Alien ships shimmered across the sky like floating stars, healing cities and oceans with waves of silver energy. People danced in the streets, children laughed for the first time in years, and hope returned to a planet that had long forgotten it. But not everyone saw peace, and some saw danger. In the halls of power, fear began to whisper louder than gratitude. Inside the underground bunkers of world leaders, the screens glowed red. Footage of alien ships filled every wall, and generals shouted over one another. "They're invading," one said. "They're building control grids over our cities." Another slammed his fist on the table. "We have to strike before it's too late." But a quiet voice spoke from the corner, an old diplomat, trembling slightly. "They came because of one man's kindness," he said softly. "Maybe we should try remembering what he did." Yet fear spreads faster than truth. Governments raised their weapons to the sky, Satellites locked onto the alien fleet. Missile silos hummed, pilots ran to jets. The world stood on the edge of chaos again. Eli watched it all unfold on the screens in front of him. Sitting beside the Queen aboard her ship, she had invited him to the stars. But he still chose to stay on Earth for now. To watch, to guide, to hope. They're afraid, he said quietly. They always are. The Queen looked at him with calm eyes that glowed like galaxies. Yes, she replied, because they have only known war, not wonder. Her voice was gentle, yet her presence filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Eli turned to her. You could crush them if you wanted. She shook her head slowly. Power cannot teach peace, only mercy can. As she spoke, alarms echoed across the fleet. A human missile had been launched, a desperate act by frightened men. It streaked through the sky toward the largest alien vessel. Its engine screaming, Eli jumped to his feet. They fired? No, stop it. But it was too late. The missile was only seconds away. Then something incredible happened. The alien ships didn't fire back. Instead, they released a pulse of light so pure that it froze the missile in the air. The weapon disintegrated silently, melting into harmless sparks that fell like snow below. Soldiers and civilians watched in stunned silence. No explosions, no death, only light. And from the Queen's ship, a voice echoed across every screen. Every radio, every heart. This is not war, she said. This is forgiveness. Her words swept across the planet like wind over water. Missiles powered down, radar screens went dark, and the sound of weapons faded. The world stood still, unable to comprehend the power that refused to harm. Even the generals who had shouted for war fell silent, staring at the screens in disbelief. Eli watched her, awe and relief mixing in his eyes. You could have ended everything, he whispered. But you didn't, the Queen smiled faintly. You once told me that warmth is stronger than fear. I finally understand what you meant. She turned toward the glowing view of Earth, now peaceful under the starlit sky. Your people are learning, she said softly. They are frightened children, but they can still grow. For the next days, the aliens worked quietly, helping Earth's people rebuild their hospitals. Farms and homes, no armies, no control. No demands, only guidance. They taught humans how to purify water, grow food again, and heal their lands. Some humans joined them, learning alien languages and science. For the first time, knowledge flowed both ways, not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. Eli became the bridge between two worlds. He met with world leaders standing beside the Queen, reminding them that peace must be chosen, not forced. Many still distrusted her, but when they saw her kneel beside a dying child and heal him with light, their anger melted into silence. The world began to call her the Star Queen, and him the Man of Warmth together. They changed history, not with weapons but with compassion. One evening, as the sun set behind the silver ships hovering like clouds, Eli stood on the same bridge where it all began. He watched the water shimmer gold and silver under the alien lights. The Queen appeared beside him, her armor reflecting the fading sunlight. She looked at him quietly. The war never happened, she said. Eli nodded slowly, smiling. Because you chose not to fight. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Eli, because you did first. The wind carried her words like a promise across the sky, and as the alien fleet rose higher, preparing to leave, people everywhere looked up. Their eyes filled not with fear this time, but with gratitude. The human who had once been forgotten had become a legend, and the war that could have destroyed worlds became a story told to children, a story of how one act of warmth saved an entire species from itself. The eternal flame years passed like whispers in the wind. The cities of Earth stood shining again, healed by alien hands and human hope. Skies once gray were now bright blue. Oceans glowed at night like mirrors of the stars. Children were born into a world that no longer feared the sky, and they grew up hearing a single name. Spoken with reverence, Eli. He lived quietly, never claiming credit for anything. He refused wealth, refused power, choosing instead to stay in the same rebuilt part of the city where everything began. People came from far away to see him, to touch the man whose kindness stopped a war. But he always smiled and said the same thing. I only gave someone a blanket. To him, it had never been about miracles. It had been about mercy. Sometimes at night, he would sit by the bridge where the river glowed faintly silver. The air there still carried a strange warmth, like the universe remembered that one act. He'd look up at the stars, wondering if she was out there, the queen with eyes of light. She had returned to her world long ago, promising to watch from afar, and Eli, though older now, still felt her presence when the wind moved gently across the water. One cold evening, as the first snow began to fall, Eli sat wrapped in a simple coat, watching the city lights flicker like small stars below. He felt tired, not the kind of tired that comes from work, but the kind that comes when life itself begins to rest. He closed his eyes, whispering softly, "I hope she's all right." And as if the universe heard him, the air began to glow faintly gold. A low hum filled the night, deep and familiar. Eli opened his eyes and gasped, tears welling instantly above him. A light descended from the clouds, soft, slow, graceful. It wasn't fire or lightning, it was a ship, glowing like a piece of the dawn. The people nearby stopped and stared, whispering in awe, "It's her, the queen." The ramp opened silently and she stepped out, still as radiant as the day he first saw her, her silver hair flowing, her eyes warm with memory. Eli smiled faintly. "You kept your promise." The queen nodded, her voice gentle as ever. "I told you I would come back." She looked around the peaceful city and said softly, "Your people are healing." Eli laughed weakly. "Not my people."
"Our people now," her eyes shimmered. "Yes."
"Ours." She knelt before him again, the same way she had all those years ago. Around them, snowflakes froze mid-air, caught in the warmth that radiated from her touch. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of his heart. "You gave me life," she whispered. "Now let me give you rest." Eli shook his head with a small smile. "I'm not afraid. I've seen enough light for one lifetime." The queen's voice trembled. "Your story will live forever." He chuckled softly. "Stories fade, but kindness doesn't." Tears, bright as silver, rolled down her cheeks, glowing like stars against her skin. As the light around them grew brighter, Eli looked at her one last time, whispering, "Thank you for remembering." Then there was silence. The snow fell again. Softly covering the bridge, the queen stood motionless, her hand still where his heart had been. But Eli was gone. His body dissolved into soft light, rising slowly into the air like dust from a star. The queen smiled through her tears, watching as the light drifted upward. Merging with the sky, moments later a new star appeared above Earth. Glowing brighter than any other, her people named it Helios. The star of warmth. Every night it shone above the world, not as a weapon, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder that compassion could change the fate of worlds. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the queen whispered his name one last time, "Eli," the human who taught the stars to feel. From that day on, travelers across galaxies spoke of an old legend, of a man who had nothing yet gave everything, of a blanket that carried the warmth of a heart strong enough to light the heavens, and they called it the eternal flame, the story of the homeless human whose kindness turned darkness into dawn.